everyone, this is Jordan Bradford here with Jeff Beck, and you're listening to Just Ballin' with JB, brought to you by D. Oliver Design. For all your commercial graphic design needs, visit dolliverdesign.com. Join us each week as we break down the best stories in sports and play some games along the way. With that, why don't we just go ahead and get this kicked off with biggest news of the week, Jeff, or day, I should say.
Breaking.
Breaking news. What do we
Not
got?
breaking it this time, but close to breaking. But yeah, today, Jets decide to fire Robert Saleh. So he was 20-36 record with the Jets. His time there, first time Woody Johnson has fired a coach mid-season in his 25 years as owner. So obviously, I think Saleh's been talked about being on the hot seat, and people have kind of been thinking it might be a possibility, but given a 25-year history never doing it, it's one of those weird, shocking but not shocking. How do you look at it? And I mean, who are you blaming for everything that's going wrong with New York?
Yeah, I mean, first, it sounds like reports are that he was pretty shocked and pretty surprised by the fact that he was getting let go. So that obviously is never fun. Usually, I feel like it's kind of mutual, and I think in this case, he felt a little blindsided, which
Well, he
I
also,
think given
along with that report, he said that he was going to fire Hackett possibly this morning. He ends up getting the can before he got to take any action, I guess. I mean, that's the reports.
just goes to show you if you're going to throw someone under the bus, do it right away before you get
Yeah,
thrown under the bus first.
do not
I
wait.
assume Hackett lost his job too. I didn't really see anything about that, but I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? The defense is great at times. It's good most of the time, great at times.
Mhm.
Offense has been lagging way behind. I don't necessarily blame all of that on Robert Saleh. I think it was a marriage that was just never going to work, right? I don't know that he's a good fit for New York, and I don't really understand what they're doing with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they acted like he was going to be the savior of the Jets organization. And he was going to be the quarterback to like kind of end their QB misery over the last 50 years. And I never believed in it. Obviously, he got injured in the fourth play last year, so that's tough. But his his last full season, I should say, his last full season is in 2022, and he had the worst QBR of his career of any season. So it was his worst year statistically in his last full season, and the Jets brought him in thinking that he was magically going to be this great offensive player when they have struggled on the offensive line. I'm not that sold on their weapons. Like, I know a lot of people like Garrett Wilson. I don't know. I don't know that I've seen enough to put him on that upper echelon of receivers when that's such a deep position in the league. But yeah, I put the blame on the front office here ultimately, though. I think, they're the ones who brought in Robert Saleh. They brought in Aaron Rodgers. And I just think that they were trying to piece something together that was never going to work. Matt Hackett, can't hack it. That's just what it is. Like, he wasn't even calling the plays in Green Bay. He was just Aaron Rodgers' best friend. So he just brings him around, gets all these jobs. Like, I think the front office needs to look in the mirror and figure out what are we actually trying to accomplish here, because you can't go out and hire another defensive coach. And I don't know what you do with Aaron Rodgers going forward, but obviously it's not working. And, unfortunately, a man lost his job.
Yeah, never fun when anybody gets fired. I don't think either one of us have an attachment to him or that team. So, is what it is to us. I don't dislike that. I mean, I think the agreement is definitely in the fact that I really don't put a whole lot of this on Sal. I mean, I think similar to the way you talk about the weapons that they have, I think that's kind of how I would describe the whole team. I mean, how do you say something other than what you've seen? I can't say Sal's a good coach based on his, 20-36 record. He hasn't shown me anything to believe he is a good coach. But at the same time, I haven't watched him and thought he's a terrible coach, right? It's just been hard to really to decide on any of them. Garrett Wilson looks like this talent, but also we haven't really seen enough to believe in that, And so I think that's kind of a lot of their whole team. But to your point, he's a defensive-minded coach, and the defense has been solid. They're, I think, essentially number 7 defense, right? Top 10 for sure defense. That appears to be doing what he should be doing. It's the offense that struggled. And as much as I think, obviously, if you're pulling back everything, you go to ownership and say, well, you brought in Rodgers and you allowed him then to bring in Hackett and bring in his buddies that he wanted in offense. So totally get where you're coming from with that. And I guess maybe at the end of the day, that's right. I guess I would just look at it and say, those owner, when you're an owner, not only are you looking for those stars, those big names, right? We all want, Jerry Jones is the perfect example. It's like he'd rather just be in the media and see his team's net worth grow versus actually win. So there's a little bit of both of that. You can understand why you'd want to bring in a Rodgers, think he might be good, but I have to put more blame on him, I think, than anybody. I'm not saying he would intentionally sabotage anything. I don't think anybody would truly do that. But I think he has never been a huge fan of Saleh. And I think just because of that mental block, it probably has hurt his performance, honestly, more than he'd even like it to be hurt. I put some just on him being older and, not being as good. But I bet that's put a little bit of a mental block on his own performance. And then, we talk about you bring in Hackett, you bring in these guys like, when you're that top guy, the ownership is going to have trust in you that you're going to be making right decisions for the team. And I just don't feel like since he's gotten there that he's really done that. Now, you can blame ownership for allowing him to kind of have that power. That's totally fair. But I really look at it and think you've got to put a lot of this on Rodgers and his stubbornness to do certain things and his commitment to people that probably are not the best people to be in line with. And yeah, I think Robert Saleh is just clearly the fall guy in this. And again, I'm not singing his praises that he's some amazing coach, but yeah, to get fired, 5 games in, pretty unfortunate for him.
Yeah, tough spot for him. But, this is going to start the coaching carousel now. So, typically as soon as one coach goes, the seats get kind of hot for the next coaches in that line because all these teams are now going to be looking. Cincinnati, Jacksonville. You don't think they're looking at the Jets and wondering, well, okay, what are they looking at for a candidate? Because if the Jets and the Bengals and the Jags are all going to end up competing over the same coach, my guess is that that's going to be a pretty competitive, situation. And I think the Jets are going to win out financially in that because their owner, I think, is clearly willing to spend a lot more than certainly Cincinnati's, but maybe even Jacksonville's. But it's going to create an interesting environment here over the next couple of weeks to see if, Cincinnati falls again, Jacksonville falls again. Are there now 2 or 3 positions that are available now in the NFL? So it's never fun for the coaches, but it's, kind of fun for all of us fans to watch and speculate and, kind of try to figure out, well, what is the next year going to look like? Can they fix it? But I do agree with you on the Jets in this situation. I don't think Rodgers was interested in making it work with Saleh unless basically he didn't have to interact with him. And that was just not going to likely work. Certainly not in an NFL, environment, which is basically, as John Middlecoff always calls it, it's like Wall Street on grass. It's, it's that type of environment, and you got to be all bought in all the way around.
Yeah. We've talked about the coaching stuff quite a bit just throughout the NFL, how quickly they are to get rid of people. And I think that just goes to show you have your top tier coaches, whether they're the Belichick, Tomlin kind of just overall great coaches, your younger but really good offensive minded coaches, LaFleur, Shanahan's, those guys. You have some really very clearly just bad coaches. Like they're not a player's coach. They're not good schematically, just not good coaches. Everybody else, I think, is just completely average. And I think it's just about the right fits at the right timing, right? Saleh might be the perfect coach for some team out there. And for whatever reason, just not with this team. So to your point, I think that's what opens up those floodgates is someone looking like, well, hey, he might not work there, but we actually think he could fit with this and be good here. And you just never know where it'll go. So yeah, definitely intriguing for the fans. That's for sure. We'll see how things go with them, but not a great sign for the Jets this year. That's always tough to bounce
certainly
back.
A far cry from their Super Bowl hopes that they had at the beginning of the year. So.
Good luck.
Slight change of gears, though. Let's talk a little NBA. We're going to not spend a whole lot of time on it, but the NBA preseason just started. And, what are you looking forward to the most, or what are you most excited about for this 2024-2025 NBA season?
Yeah, I started just kind of jotting down some things I was excited about and wanted to see. I can't remember if we did mention it in the earlier pod, but definitely both of us being, Milwaukee Bucks fans, excited to see them. We heard Dame talk about just not really being 100% last year. I mean, making the move from Portland, going through divorce, seemed like he's a little bit out of shape. A few of those things. So I'm really curious to see how he comes back. I jotted down the Lakers. LeBron seems completely rejuvenated after the Olympics. Like maybe I am the top 2 player, 3 player in the league. I mean, obviously it's a very debatable thing. People have all thought he's still top 10, but he wins the MVP in the Olympics. I mean, he seems ready to roll. His son being there, obviously a cool storyline. Does that also add to his energy? And then all of a sudden I started just kind of making these lists. And I was like, well, now I'm kind of actually curious, like the old NBA versus the new NBA. That I think is the most intriguing to me. You have those 2 teams I mentioned are definitely older teams at this point. And I threw in like the Suns, Kevin Durant getting older, Devin Booker, is a seasoned veteran. How are they going to shape up against these new up and coming teams? We've talked about the Thunder, the T-Wolves just made a move. They're obviously considered one of the younger up and coming teams. The Spurs, I don't know if they're going to really be in true contention this year. We'll see, but Wemby does look pretty amazing, and it looks like he's going to jump to the top pretty quickly. The Kings are still relatively young. So, yeah, I think that's going to be the most intriguing thing for me, just kind of as a whole, is seeing are these new guys fully going to come in and kind of take over the league, or the Durants, the LeBrons, the Dame Lillards, Paul George, are they going to still be able to hang on another year, 2 years, and still say, hey, we're still here, we're not done yet? So that's what I'm kind of looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I've been thinking about the kind of changing of the guard in the NBA, right? You've got, this LeBron and Steph era that we've had for the last 15 to 20 years
Yeah,
is
yeah.
coming to an end, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even though you could make a pretty strong, or you could definitely make the argument that LeBron was the best player on the best team at the Olympics. So obviously he still got it. Steph had one of the best games in
Yeah,
Olympic
that was
history
insane.
and started getting really hot there at the end. And so, how long do they have left? Either unfortunately at that age too, and with basketball, you're one pretty, significant injury away from just like not really being able to do it anymore. So I'm definitely excited to kind of just take in LeBron, take in, Steph this year, even KD. I love his game, don't necessarily love his personality, whereas like Steph and LeBron, I think are just great. Like they're great people, they're great basketball players, they're great at just, bringing everybody together. And I'm just excited to watch them, and hopefully they both make the playoffs this year. I'd really like to see the Warriors back in contention, because I know a lot of people, complained about, LeBron versus the Warriors every year in the finals for like 4 or 5 years. But it was exciting. I mean, you just kind of knew like, okay, can LeBron do this? And he had one of the best comebacks ever. So that's a really exciting storyline in my head. The other one that I'm kind of thinking about is, I like watching Dallas. I like Luka. I know a lot of people, he can rub the wrong way, and he does need to work on kind of his outbursts on the court. But I love his game. I think his game reminds me a lot of LeBron's offensive game. Clearly not the defensive player LeBron was in his younger age, but offensively, kind of similar style, like facilitator, ball in the hand. Would like to see him shoot a little bit more efficiently at times, maybe rely on the teammates. But I'm wondering if Dallas can build on last season. I think they kind of surprised people by getting to the NBA, finals against the Celtics. And, I mean, a lot of people had the Mavs favored in that finals. So the question is like, if Luka's that guy, if he is, the next best player in the league and wants to take claim to that title, I think he's got to bring the Mavs at bare minimum back to the Western Conference Finals. And I think that's bare minimum. He better play well in doing so. At some point though, like he's gotta get through that barrier and win. And Their rosters, I like it, but, their second best player is Kyrie Irving, and he's done great in Dallas. But, I don't necessarily trust him to be, totally cool and calm and collected every single season, because he hasn't always done that. So, you wonder how long that window is for them. So definitely kind of thinking about, those two as my like main stories that I think are the ones to look out for.
Yeah.
But I love the other stuff too. I mean, Wemby, the Thunder, young teams kind of making that next step.
There's a lot of
Look
stuff
for a
that
good
could
season.
be interesting, I think, with this. And right now, I mean, the comparison to, like, the NFL going on, like, I feel like a lot of the things that you would have thought were really interesting or looking forward to in the NFL, like, some of them are just kind of falling flat. And it's regardless of who you're a fan of, I think that's the disappointing thing. I mean, we've just talked about, like, offenses being down, for the year, quarterback play being down for the year. I don't care who you're rooting for. Like, I've always said that a million times. Like, I just want to watch good football being played. I want to watch good basketball being played. So to me, it's like, I think all those different storylines, those different players, whether you're an up and coming team, whether you're an old guy still trying to make it, I'd love to see everybody play just to the level that they can play to make it interesting. You mentioned LeBron and Steph going at it. Like, it'd be great if those teams don't start 1-10 and then they're just set on the play-in tournament. Like, that's the best case scenario. Now you're like, it's almost impossible that you're going to be able to go on a run, especially at that age, and actually get to the finals. Like, how about we just start an average season and we're like 5-4, and you're in the mix and you're bouncing between 6th and maybe 5th. You get on a little run, you're 4th, and then you're 7th. You're in the mix all year. I just think for fans, that would be really fun and exciting to see all that, consistency throughout the year. But yeah, to your point, I mean, with the Mavs and stuff, I mean, I think there's, those storylines. I mean, yeah, as a rematch destined to happen. I mean, are the Celtics more motivated? People have talked about that also. Are they more motivated than like any champion because Jaylen Brown doesn't make the Olympics? Jason Tatum's getting DMPs in the Olympics over his teammate, who is like 6th, 7th man. Or I think he's starting, I guess, by the end, Derek White. But, so I think there's a lot of interesting storylines throughout. And for me, like I said, I just want to see them all kind of play out to some degree. I just don't want to see the Celtics come in and flop. I mean, that's not going to be fun to me either. I'm not saying I want to see them win the championship again, but I'd like to see them come back and act like, yeah, maybe they could win it again. Like, let's get on a run. Let's do it. So yeah, I'm excited. I think there's a lot of different storylines, a lot of different talent. There's so many players now that are really good and intriguing to actually watch. So I think it'll be a fun season. I'm excited. I'm considering going up to the Bucks preseason tomorrow, even just to see if LeBron and Bronny get on the court together, because that could be worthwhile to check out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I like that idea. Well, hey, before we get to our next topic, we've got a one biter coming in hot. And here it is. So, time for Georgia to reset the days without an arrest or traffic citation back to 0 again, because this marks more than 25 arrests or driving citations. I laugh, but since the fatal January 2023 crash that killed an offensive lineman and a recruiting staffer. I think this might be something worth keeping your eye on. At some point, the levee's going to break there in Georgia.
Yeah, not good headlines you want to be in, that's for sure.
Not at all. But with that, let's jump into a little college football and talk about the weekend that was. Upsets all around. What looked like a pretty boring college football weekend, very few ranked teams playing anybody of note, turned out to be one of the more chaotic weekends that college football has seen in a while. Is there any you gleaned from those games over the weekend? Any feelings you've got about any of those teams now going forward?
No, not a whole lot. I don't, we've talked a little bit in the NFL, just kind of coming out with a flat game, having one bad game. I don't know if you bring in the college football playoff to what it is, if this has a little bit of that impact. We've talked about everyone, I think, coming into the season. Now you might see a team with 3 losses get in, or a team with 2 losses. Before it was a point where you really can't lose. I mean, you lose a bad game and it's going to be tough to get in. Obviously, you don't think any players are coming into games perfect. Like, yeah, we could lose a game, no big deal. But just it's that mental that goes on behind the scenes that you don't think about. So, I wonder if that has any impact on it. But yeah, I think the two big ones for me, I mean, we've talked a couple times just about the SEC looking dominant and, kind of them and Big Ten. Bama gets huge win over Georgia and then goes down to Vandy. Those guys are celebrating carrying the field goal post down to the river and stuff. I mean, awesome win for them, obviously. A bit of a letdown for Bama. But again, I take it as one game. You just got a great win right before this. This is a bad one, obviously. They got a lot of stuff on their schedule still, that they can make it up, and this won't hurt them. I mean, it's a tough schedule, so they could also just lose a bunch of games and then, really screw over the season. But at Tennessee, at LSU, at Oklahoma still coming up, obviously some major wins they can put up. Boomer Sooner and easily redeem, that loss. Again, tough schedule, so who knows? I mean, they could go the other way if things really went rough. And then Tennessee, kind of the same thing. I mean, as you just expecting, these guys were looking really good. We were thinking things are going to continue to keep rolling the way they were, and they go down to Arkansas. So again, I mean, they got Alabama. They're playing at their place, and then they got to go to Georgia. Those are probably the two big noteworthy games for them. So that's the other kind of challenge with these teams is as good as the conference is and as good as, your losses could still look, you're going to beat up on each other a little bit. So someone's going to lose some of these, someone's going to win some of them. But that was probably the biggest note for me. I felt like the SEC was rolling, and those were two pretty
Yeah, I just think people need to not overreact to especially the Bama loss and the Tennessee loss. And Tennessee's offense did not look very good, so that's a bit concerning because their offenses looked so good to start the season. You wonder if it's kind of petering out. I don't think so. I think they just played a bad game. It's college football, so these young kids are not going to be playing their best every single weekend. It just is impossible to get 18 to 22-year-olds to be at peak performance at the exact right time on schedule every single week. You can get close, the Bamas, the Georgias, like they get close, but you can't do it every week, and there's always going to be a dud. And Bama needs to work on their pass defense is atrocious. They've got to figure that out. They get that cleaned up. I think they're going to be fine. Great win for Vanderbilt, and honestly, great game plan and good for that school. Their first ever program win over a top 5 team in the nation, and it just happened to be the number 1 team and Bama. So another kind of storyline that I feel like didn't get a lot of talking point over the weekend was you have these upsets. So Vanderbilt beats Bama, Arkansas beats Tennessee, Minnesota beats USC, and all 3 of those home fan bases rush the field afterwards. And I'm not like an anti-rush the field dude or rush the court dude. I actually think it's kind of cool, but it's got to be in a moment that really deserves it. And I think the only game this weekend that deserved fans rushing the field was the Vanderbilt game, because Arkansas is not Vanderbilt. Okay, they're a real football program, and they expect to win games. Whether it's, against the number 4 team or not, they expect to win games in the SEC. And Minnesota, you just beat a USC team that was 11th in the country. Probably that loss knocks them out of the college football playoffs because I don't think they're going to have enough quality wins to get back into it. So, what are you rushing the field for? You're a middling team in the Big Ten.
I mean, you sound like you just don't like having fun. That's it. You just don't.
I just think when you have that kind of fun, it's got to be deserved. You got to earn it.
No, I do agree. I mean, obviously, I think we've seen over the years, you just see some random ones that are like, what the heck are we doing? It's just interesting because when they are these big televised games, when it's on ESPN, everyone gets to see it and judge it. But you picture, I mean, if you're just back in your college days, you're 18 to 22 years old, you're drinking with all your friends, and it happens like if even one person just decides to jump the rail.
I turned 21.
You're good. It's 18, you were dead sober, you might not even be at the game. But yeah, once you're 21 and you're there, if one person decides to go, we'd be like, let's do it. Like, let's rage. Like, any reason to rage, right? I mean, that's kind of the thought. So I do get it from like the bigger perspective where we're seeing it. It's definitely like, okay, guys, like, what are we doing? Hopefully we have matured and we can view it from that lens. But when you're in college, I mean, man, I get it. Any chance to just let loose, it's still a win. It's fun. We're having a good time. So I get it. But it is unfortunate that the programs get fined for a lot of that stuff for the kids, like $250,000 party. I mean, hey, sounds like a fun one to be at, but yeah, not ideal for
You
the
know,
programs.
Vanderbilt's got a lot of successful alumni being an academic institution, unlike most of the SEC schools. So I would hope maybe one of their successful alumni would step up and offer to pitch in and maybe pay
Little
that
boost of money.
$100,000 fine.
Yeah, no question. Someone
Just
probably
a little
had that in
something to
cash on them. It was like, oh, 100,000. Yeah,
probably.
I'll pay that on my way out.
Do you take valet? All right, let's switch it up again here. We're going to move on to the NFL and talk
Wait,
a little
last
bit
thing
about.
before we got a one biter popped in. One biter
Ooh,
popped in to finish out our college football talk here. NCAA athletes facing more online verbal abuse, and it's coming mainly from angry sports bettors. um,
it's
so
not the
that's
people listening to our locks. I know that. I know
yeah.
our lock listeners are not unhinged.
No, I
They're
mean it's
hinged.
definitely the parlays. It's people dropping parlays in there. Yeah, not those stink. I mean, I always see them, and a lot of the pros now seem to kind of push them off and make fun of it. The college guys that might be a little taking it to heart a little bit more, but you start getting paid, and that's just something that comes with getting paid. It seems like so you got to deal with it, and yeah, I mean turn your Twitter off, your X, whatever it is, and don't listen to them. But yeah, if you're one of those unhinged sports bettors, what are you doing? Just you put the money on it. If you're listening to us, if you're listening to some shark, whoever you're listening to, it's on you. It ain't on the players. So leave them alone.
That's right. All right, so now back to NFL talk here. We're going to talk some divisions. So last week we broke down our top 8 Super Bowl contenders, and we'll revisit that on a future episode here. But this week we're going to talk about divisions, storylines that we think are worth having a little bit of an extra conversation on. So, Jeff, we're going to go ahead and start with you. So let's talk AFC North. And is this the most interesting division top to bottom?
Yeah, I think it has to be right up there. There's probably a couple that you could consider, and I'm sure depending who you're a fan of, it is going to have a little influence and bias on it. I think for us, not really fans of either of those, and the fact that we have it up there means it's definitely an intriguing division. I think the reason why we'd probably consider it so intriguing is not only is it a competitive division in a lot of ways, but there's also kind of unique, different storylines all the way. So just kind of running through them top to bottom and dive into what you like the most. But, you got the Ravens, slow start, bouncing back. We have number 2 in our top 8. And at this point, maybe, we're feeling pretty good about that, even though they started slow. Might have 2 MVP candidates in the early start, Lamar and Derrick Henry. I think might be on most people's top 5 ballot right now. So they're looking pretty good, pretty interesting. Steelers, obviously, we've talked plenty about them. I won't jump too much into them, but 3-2, great defense. And still, is there a quarterback controversy? Like, can we lock this in? Can we go
I don't know.
forward?
I saw Russ full eye black, coach's band. He was ready to get put into the game, even though he had the opportunity, and they put in Kyle Allen, I
Yeah,
think.
no,
Kyle
but
Pitts.
what I heard, I had some inside sources, and they said he thought it was Halloween already, and he was just dressing up for Halloween.
He was
I don't
dressing
know
up as
what
Justin Fields.
yeah, I dressed up as his idol, his starting quarterback idol. But
That actually is probably not a 0% probability.
no, there's at least a percent. It's possible. But I mean, yeah, that's still possibly in play. So that's intriguing. The Browns, how terrible they are when we thought that they, last year we expect them to be pretty good. The defense looked good. We
Are they
thought Deshaun.
are they in the worst situation of any team going forward with their quarterback room? I mean, what are they going to do about this? They have got so much money lined up for Deshaun Watson. It's clear he can't play anymore. Like the experiment's over.
Yeah.
Like, he's
We've
not
talked.
getting
I
it
mean,
back. He
sometimes you
lost
just
his
got to
mojo.
bite the bullet. Yeah, you just gotta. Hey, we made a bad decision. We got to swallow. We just got to move on. I
I know
don't
it's going to
know, but
suck for their cap, but just take the pill and move on and figure out how to pay for it. But like, Jameis Winston is not going to be worse than what Deshaun Watson is right now. I'm confident of that. And if he is, you get the number one pick in the draft. You might as well tank.
might as well take it, but try something different. And you got to just think of the other ripple effect of it. You're playing this guy who everybody in the locker room maybe doesn't like, is not happy that we're still
Doesn't
playing this
seem
guy.
like it.
We understand we paid him, but like we don't like him. He's clearly not good. The fans, I mean, there's a ripple effect to it. There's not just simply like, oh, just the money. I mean, that's a huge part, and obviously that is going to be hard to swallow that, but you got to think of the ripple effect that is going on again. Fans, players, I mean, everybody involved. Not a good situation there. So that's intriguing. It's a dumpster fire, but it's hard to look away from an accident. You kind of keep your eye on it. So, and then you got Cincinnati, best 1-4 team of all time. Maybe. I mean, some people are probably feeling that way. I mean, you see them go toe to toe with the Ravens. Ravens should have won it, but then almost lost it. Cincinnati should have won it, but then lost it. So I mean, it was a close game, but I mean that offense is as good as it gets in the NFL, I think. But 1-4, can you get out of that? So I just think top to bottom, there are some pretty significant storylines across the board that are making that division very intriguing.
Yeah, and what's fun about the division to me is that those AFC North teams always seem to play each other pretty tough.
Yes.
So you get a lot of good games. If you like, even with the years when like Pittsburgh and Cleveland weren't that good or like just kind of average, you turn that game on Thursday night or Monday night, and it was going to be a solid, traditional football game. They're just ground and pound, baby.
Yeah. I mean, they seem to truly dislike each other, which is fun to watch, right? I don't care what you do off the field, off the court, but like on the field, I want to act like you hate each other. And like I said, they're a little more of the traditional football. It's not West Coast flinging it around kind of soft. I mean, they come out to play. And so I think no matter how bad your teams are, I mean, you got 2 1-4 teams, and then you got 2 3-2 teams. I think the Ravens are.
Yeah.
I mean, but they're gonna battle regardless of how bad or how good any teams are in there. That's another aspect to it that just I mean it's intriguing. They're gonna duke it out, and I think we probably have a good idea of how things will look. But again, Cincy is still. I said myself they'd be toast if they lost that game, and even I find it hard to say fully like I'm totally
It's
out on
hard.
them.
I
But
mean, they were a 53-yard field goal away from winning the game, and if they don't lose that game against New England, suddenly those two games flip. They're 3-2, and they're in fine shape. Instead, they're 1-4, and it feels like it's insurmountable because they can only lose reasonably like 4 more games. If they lose 9 games, I don't think that's going to get them in. I don't think 4 is either. I think they have to go 10-7. And at this point, that means they got to go 9-3 the rest of the way. I just don't know if it's in them,
it's
but
a lot to
I
ask.
think they're going to give it a good effort because I think, especially on the offensive side of the ball, they've got some gamers. So I think it's a great division for just watching good games the rest of the season. I think you're going to get continuously good football if you watch AFC North games.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting for us too to see if the Ravens stay a top couple team like we had them in the Super Bowl contenders, and see if the Steelers keep things going for my
Mm-hmm.
initial pick on them. So yeah, we'll see how that division goes, but should be fun all the way through.
Yes, it should
You
be.
got what NFC North you're going to touch on. So you got NFC North.
Yeah.
Talk about intriguing there, interesting there. This one, I mean, is it just the best division in football and best division in football without like a top 5 quarterback? Top 10, I guess, could be arguable depending on who you are, but at least not a top 5 quarterback, I think, across the board unanimously, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think the NFC North is the best division right now, top to bottom. I think the the AFC North, the division with the Steelers. That obviously that division feels pretty tough, but I think Cleveland kind of sticks out as like no one's very afraid of them outside of maybe their own division. But you look at the NFC North, I don't know that anybody really wants to play any NFC North team. The Vikings look unbeatable. I am shocked. And even though I was I was high on Sam Darnold after the first couple weeks, I was like, all right, I think they've got something. I didn't expect them to just be this good. And I feel like the Vikings are in a good position to maybe host playoff games in the playoffs, and that's going to be very helpful. I think it's the best division in football right now. I also think they don't have a top 8 quarterback. So I think to some degree that could potentially limit their ceiling on whatever team or teams likely make it out of this division into the playoffs. I think you still have to have a top quarterback to be favored to win Super Bowls. I know you can win a Super Bowl and get to Super Bowls if you are defensive led or you have really good supporting cast, but history is on the side of you need to have an all-time great quarterback if you want to be a team that is going to be contending for not just one Super Bowl, but multiple. And, with that being said, I think the Bears potentially have the best outlook of the 4 teams. They've obviously got the youngest quarterback, outside of J.J. McCarthy, who we haven't even seen play yet. Or we may not even see him play. Sam Darnold keeps playing this well. Are the Vikings just going to move off of him? I mean, that could be a storyline at the end of the year going into next season. Is
How old is Darnold?
He's like 27, 28.
He's still pretty young. Yeah.
I mean, he could reasonably play 10 more years of football.
Might be. I mean, if he looks really good all season long, and whether they make a run or not, maybe they look to trade JJ. If someone needs Cleveland wants a decent looking quarterback that's already made it there. If they don't get in the draft somehow, a team like that, and just say, hey, we'll trade it away, and then they just pick up some other kind of lifelong backup, to fill in behind. I mean, definitely possible.
I think it's possible that Darnold could eventually creep into maybe that number 8 spot in the top 8 quarterbacks. I don't think Jordan Love is there. I really liked how he played at the end of last season. I have been a bit unimpressed with his overall body of work, so I think I just need to see more of him perform well. If he obviously has another playoff game like he did in Dallas last year, I think I'm going to have to probably, go ahead and be willing to admit that he's a top 5-ish type quarterback. But yeah. I think that as of right now, I think they've got a fantastic offensive coach, and that is helping Jordan Love a lot. You look at, the Bears, for example, defensive coach, the only team in the division whose head coach is a defensive coach, and Caleb Williams is starting to look pretty good. This last week, he looked very good. And I know it was against the Panthers. I know people are going to say that's, any team can beat up on the Panthers. But I always feel like when you're a really good team or if you're a really good player, you perform really good against weaker competition. So I loved to see that the Bears did not play down to competition. They're getting better. They're improving as a team. They could have easily won a sloppy game like they did in week 1 against a bad Tennessee team. But they've improved, and they went out on the field, and they showed it, and Caleb Williams led that. So I like the division a lot because I think that every single team is really good. But I think one of these quarterbacks is going to have to make a significant step up if any team in the division wants to be a legitimate Super Bowl contender for this season.
Yeah. No, I totally hear where you're coming from on all that stuff. I mean, just a few things I was thinking about as you were talking. I mean, as far as being the best division, they're the only division without a team with a losing record. So they don't have that dud at the bottom. 3-2.
And all positive point differentials too.
Correct. 3-2 is the worst record. The Packers and Bears are tied for that in their division. Every other division has someone with a losing record, a total dud. So I think very clearly right now it is the best division, especially with the Vikings ascending in a way none of us thought they would. And they also have one of 2 5-0 teams in the division. So clearly I think they are the best division right now in football. We'll see if that plays out. And to your point about the quarterbacks, get what you mean. I think when you look back and you see some of those weird data points, and it's like this is the first, this is the first Super Bowl without Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning, whatever it was. It's just like literally 20 straight years of these guys. It's like Yeah, having a really good quarterback can save you. We've seen it with the Chiefs multiple times. We're seeing it right now. I mean, guys are going down like crazy, and it's like new guys are they had 4 tight ends on one play that in the game. It's just like, what are they doing? But they're figuring stuff out. So having that really good quarterback makes a big difference. And probably to win the Super Bowl, someone's going to have to step up to be that. But I would say they're probably looking at the Lions of last year and just saying like, hey, right there is something we can do. If you have a really good team overall, average core. I mean, Goff was playing, I'd say, like a top 10 quarterback, probably. It definitely at least top 15 for sure last year. And I think he probably is right now as well. You know, those teams might be looking at that recipe and saying, like, okay, they were in the conference championship game. They're right there, you know, a game away from being in the Super Bowl. And if you get there, who knows what can happen? I mean, we've seen some pretty crazy Super Bowls over the last few years when it comes down to the last play and stuff happens. So they pull that out, they might be just looking right in their own division and being like, hey, let's do exactly what Detroit did last year and get there. I think the Bears, obviously, long term, probably even the Packers, too, have this vision of we are going to have one of those top quarterbacks at some point. We'll get to that with Jordan Love and Caleb Williams. But yeah, in the short term, use the Lions recipe and really good team football across the board and see what you can do. But tough conference right now, and that should be.
We'll see what the Commanders do the rest of the way. Obviously, I think we're pretty high on Jaden Daniels. I think he's shown that he deserves it to this point, but there's a chance that the top 4 teams in the NFC are all in the NFC North by the end of the season, which is crazy and means that one of them's probably going to miss the playoffs because I don't know how all 4 teams are going to be able to make it in. I'm not sure if it's even mathematically possible. So I think that, you know, that's going to be an interesting kind of thing to follow the rest of the year is if you're in the NFC North, you do not want to be the 4th team, even if you have a good record. You have to beat your teams in your division because you need to. And fortunately for the Bears, all their division games are kind of in the second half of the season, and they are showing improvement. So I like that for them. But yeah, NFC North is a great division. Flipping over to the AFC South, and instead of talking about the Texans specifically or the Jags, which are garbage, and who wants to talk about the Titans, what I want to know is, are the Indianapolis Colts good enough to catch the Texans with Joe Flacco? Or do they need Anthony Richardson, or does it not even matter?
You know, I don't know. I think all of us really like the Texans coming into this year. I was the first one to say, you know, it feels like they haven't done enough to prove that they can kind of play sloppy or ugly games and win, and then that be a good respite, like the Kansas City Chiefs have proven they can do, and you can trust them to be that. But they are 4-1. I think everybody in the world trusts CJ Stroud is a very good quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks out there. Composure, big throws, you name it. But they have a negative 12-point differential for the year. So to be 4-1, I mean, they are just, yeah, they're just getting by at this point. Indy, to me, from the beginning of the year, has just been one of those very average teams. They seem to play solid football. They're not ever like the bottom. They never have been the bottom, but they just seem at this point in time where they're at the last few years, they're just kind of this very average team, but they play hard. They're kind of just mediocre on both sides of the ball. You know, if another team struggles, they can pull out some wins. Flacco clearly is coming back and just like, hey, boys, I'm not done. I'm ready to roll. I don't care. You know, talk about Aaron Rodgers. I'm right behind him, and I'm better than him. You know, he did with the Browns, doing it now. I mean, he does look good. I don't know if they'd be able to catch the Texans even with him in. And my personal opinion is if you're just talking this year and this year alone, we want to win as many games as possible. Sure, I bet Flacco probably could do that for you over Anthony Richardson. If you're looking at it and saying, and this is probably those 2 schools of thought, is it about getting your player in, getting them the live reps, the experience, and that's going to help them be better? Or are they better off sitting behind a seasoned veteran who's won a Super Bowl, who has the experience and can show them the ropes and teach them? To me, I think that's the biggest question. And I think that's how you have to kind of announce that and go into it. If you're just going to say, yeah, Flacco's outplayed Anthony Richardson, he's going at it, that's probably not a good look. If we say Anthony Richardson's been battling some injuries, it's been tough to keep him on there. We want to get him 100% healthy. We think, well, Flacco's in there, he can learn from him, get some experience. I don't mind that play, but I think just to think like, hey, Flacco's outplayed him and we're going to roll with it is probably just not worthwhile because you have to wonder how many years Flacco has left. They're not getting to the Super Bowl this year. Probably not happening next year. I mean, maybe they squeak in the playoffs if you keep him in and do it. I just think you got to be thinking long term with this. And if you're saying, hey, we think Anthony Richardson is the future, which I think most of us think he has that potential. Again, it's been Josh Allen roller coaster-esque for a lot of his career. The few games he's played, I guess it hasn't even been that many games. It's kind of like, well, let's get him in and fill that out. So that's just the way I look at it. They're not a Super Bowl contender this year either way. It's really just your preference on, do you let him sit behind the experienced pro and see that and learn from behind, or do you let him get the live reps and learn that way? With his injuries, maybe it does make sense to throw him on the bench.
Yeah, I think the Colts just need to figure out what direction they want to go here. And to me, I'm not sold on Anthony Richardson. I don't think he's as good as Josh Allen. I think you get the roller coaster of Josh Allen, but without the fear of like, this guy can just single-handedly beat us.
Yeah.
I know he had a good couple games to start last season before he got injured, but he just hasn't even looked remotely close to that this year. He's made a couple good throws for sure, and he shows some athleticism, but I'm not seeing the like quarterback skill set there. And so if I'm the Colts, I got to like start deciding here, do we really believe in Anthony Richardson? Because if we do, then it does behoove us to win as many football games as we can until we get him back. Because hopefully you can get to the playoffs. Anthony Richardson's healthy. He's already playing, many regular season games before then, and he's getting you there. And I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender either, but you have to start making some progress as an NFL team. And it is typically like some steps, you generally, have to go from not making the playoffs to making the playoffs. You have a bad defeat. The next year you get pretty far. You overcome that first game. And I don't know that the Colts are going to do that if they play Joe Flacco. I also think if you don't think Anthony Richardson's the guy, Joe Flacco's just, you can't rely on that. Like you said, he's too old to be like the next quarterback for the next 3 years. Like,
if he'd be willing to sign a deal that says that he can go 3 years guaranteed, or else he pays back every penny that he made, then I go Flacco for sure. Let him, if you can figure out a way to negotiate that deal. But Richardson's got to figure out a way to stay on the field at a minimum. Yeah, they gotta figure that out for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to get any better if he keeps being on the bench. So
yeah, that's not working. But NFC West, let's jump into that last division we're going to touch on here. Dive into it for me. Could the Arizona Cardinals all of a sudden be the best team in this division that we thought was pretty solid division coming into the year?
Yeah, I've been disappointed in the Seahawks the last couple weeks. I feel like they started off really hot and they've made some just bad mistakes. Last week losing to they lost to the Giants, right? That was this last weekend. They lost to the Giants, and that was the 101-yard fumble return.
That game sounds like it was a hot topic.
We'll talk a little bit more about that game specifically, but that's just a really bad loss. And I just don't know that I can look at the Seahawks the same way after that loss, especially coming off the heels of losing a tough game to the Lions, in which they should have felt like they were going to win that game or could have won that game. So I'm starting to feel like the Seahawks a bit shaky. I just think the 49ers have peaked. I know they're dealing with some injuries, but their quarterback is there. They've got 2 wide receivers. They've got enough pieces to be winning football games. And they shouldn't be losing the games they're losing. I just think things are off in San Francisco. I don't think they're going to get back on track this year. I think that Ayuk contract is going to look really bad by the end of the year. because now you're going to be stuck with him, and you're not going to be able to pay him and Debo. So you're probably going to ship Debo off, and I think that's the wrong choice of the two. I probably wouldn't have picked either, to be honest with you, but for long-term contracts at least. And the Rams just too decimated with injuries. They're 1-4. I don't think they can make it back. I think the Cardinals are the best team in the division. I think that they need to prove it on the field by winning games more consistently. They can't be putting up duds like they did against the Commanders a few weeks ago. But outside of that game, all their games have been competitive, even the ones they've lost. And I think that they have got enough talent to be the best team in what I think is a division that is getting worse as the season goes on.
Yeah. No, I like all of that. I mean, I think Kyler, whatever you thought about him, he was fairly good early on and was kind of electric. He obviously got injured, and it kind of seemed like, maybe that was just a quick hype thing and he's gone. But I think he's actually a pretty good quarterback, shockingly, for as small as he is and the style of play he has. I think he's pretty good. He had Marvin Harrison into that. I mean, they appear to be a team that is kind of ascending. Where the Seahawks, I think, with Geno kind of coming in where he did at his point, it felt like a little, random. Is this going to be able to work? And it was like, it is working. A little pullback. It just doesn't have the promise of like this is an ascending team really doing well. It feels like it's a team that's definitely average. They can win some games, but there's really no momentum one way or the other. The 49ers are the interesting one. I think the Rams are just crushed with the record that they're at now and all the injuries for sure. You make a good point with the 49ers because it's easy to say, they've had all these injuries, but they still have a lot. And the 49ers are, this is me personally, I wouldn't be shocked if you feel similar, but, as being like advisors and into the math and kind of logic and that stuff, it's so easy to look at numbers and make your decisions based on that, whether it's that they're a good team or whether you're betting on them. But sometimes the numbers just don't tell it all because it's the situations that you're in, right? Ayuk had these enormous numbers, everything's good, but if people are doubling Debo or focusing on Debo and you got to worry about McCaffrey at the back, it just opens things up in ways that you can't truly comprehend when you see those numbers. You have to watch the games and you have to be really intelligent on what's happening on the field to understand that stuff. And so to your point, I mean, there's still enough talent out there that they should be able to get some things working. And Brock Purdy's a great example. I think the guy is absolutely fine, but I don't think he's a top 5 quarterback. I don't think he's a guy that is leading your team and winning you games at the end of the year. This year's a perfect example. It's like it was Mahomes MVP. People are like, well, look at the numbers, 6 picks, 6 interceptions. How is that MVP worthy? You're saying because he's winning these games. He's figuring out in the right moments. He is really in charge of winning those games. Purdy's not really in charge of it. It's get it out to these guys, and these guys are going to make plays. When it comes down to it, he's not always capable of doing that. So I do think, I think injuries will be a thing for him all year long, whether it's McCaffrey coming back or not. I just think they're going to go through some lingering, injuries all year long. But I think to your point, they hit that ceiling a couple times. And I don't know if they have like another push to get back in there. It feels like they're kind of about to start on the descent from where they were. So yeah, I don't know if Arizona is definitively the best team, but I do like their chances of making a run there and maybe surprising some people from the early. I mean, they had to be probably the 4th team picked, I would guess, maybe 3rd. But yeah, there's a good chance that they could win it.
Yeah, coming into the season, I would have had them pegged as number 4. I think
so,
I
yeah.
thought the Rams were going to be a lot better, and the injuries have really hampered them.
Yeah.
So you got to put a caveat to them, but the 49ers just can't have it both ways, right? You can't have these amazing weapons on offense, this fantastic play caller head coach, and supposedly a great quarterback if you look at the stats, and not be winning Super Bowls and not be winning games this year even. Like when they are without Christian McCaffrey or one of their other weapons, it just feels like the offense comes to a screeching halt.
Zero time to talk
point.
about it right now, but maybe a future topic is Shanahan. It's like seems taboo, like you can't even mention him being on the hot seat, and I understand why, but also like, hey, what are when these dollars start hitting, and all of a sudden they don't have as many top talented players as they've had in years past? Is he the same? Again, I'm not saying it. I'm just saying it might be a topic in the future. Like I said, no time to get into that right now, but I think that'd be a decent one to talk about a little further in a future podcast.
Yeah. You can only be a bridesmaid so many times before someone's going to expect you to be the bride. And I
Yeah,
think that might be his situation. So
very
let's
true.
wrap up part one here for now. So we're going to take a quick break and we will be back with part two. So stay tuned for part two with Just Ballin' with JB.